Okay, we're gonna get started. It's 9:01. I know we only have 50 minutes, so I want to make sure that we get a lot in. Before we begin, I wanted to find out if there were any questions that were still hovering over from the last time we met up. Any questions about chapter 4 and the participle? We are going to, if there are no questions, I want to move on because I do want us to start looking at some new things rather than spend, I know that it's important for us to review. I'm not dissing the review, but I definitely want us to be able to start looking at new things as well. So let me know if there's anyone here who has any questions, any outstanding issues that we can cover together before we move on to the next slide. No questions, not even a little one. Sue, not even a question from Sue. Wow. And if we don't have a question from Sue, I'm just teasing. You know,
that's okay. Yeah, it's
I'm teasing you, but I adore all of you. I really do. So we've got no questions about chapter 4, which is great. The participle will come up again and again. Eventually, let's take a look at Baruch She'amar. Let me just give you a little look at a prayer that I had open here. Hoping that everyone has arrived because I just closed my little thing. All right. So Baruch She'amar. This is interesting, and I'm gonna maybe take the English and the Hebrew side by side so we could take a look at how this is kind of looking at the participle. So this is kind of still the Psukei de Zimra. This is still kind of the early morning part of the Shacharit service. And what I wanted to just take a look at with the continuation of talking about the participle and how we use this form as the present tense and also this, gerund ing and the kind of noun of the creator of. Let's just take a look at how this works. So first of all, before, and this will just be kind of a gloss over, we're not going to go too deeply into this right now, because I do want to move on to the next lesson, but I kind of wanted to demonstrate this because this is a nice example of that. So let's do, before we look at this, let me just review what that participle looks like, which is the oe, wherever that is. Here it is. The oe. Okay, so we had this was our form here of the oe. I'm looking at the singular masculine, like shomer, omer, ose, lomed, the oe, right? We were looking at that as our baseline. Hold on, I have to shut my timer off. Alexa, off! Sorry, I have a cake in the oven. I know. All right, so if we look at the oe, I want you to kind of take 2 seconds to gloss over the Hebrew side.
I have a question.
Yes, Adria.
I just want to know very quickly if Alexa speaks Hebrew.
I haven't, she should be. I should be training her properly. Usually she just turns the radio on and off and turns the timer on and off. If she did speak Hebrew, it would be very basic. It would be, that's a very good point. I'm going to work on that. Thank you.
Alexa,
I wonder what her Hebrew name is, though, because I
Alexa.
think Alexa, maybe that's what it is. All right, Alexa, exactly. She's now going to be like, "What do you want? What do you want?" All right, what I'm going to do
Alexa,
here.
My Alexa won't stop talking to me now. Shut up, Alexa.
God, you got to unplug those things every once in a while. It's a little too much. All right, let's take a look at Baruch She'amar. Baruch She'amar, which is, this is a pretty standard prayer. And I want you to notice the following. Let's go on to the Hebrew side for a second with my highlighter. I'll make this, who wants to read for me? We're going to do like 1, 2, 3, 4. That was a very fat highlighter. Sue, why don't you start us off? I know your hand's already up, so I can see you. I can see you with the corner of my eye. All right.
I need all the.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right, start us off.
Okay. Baruch
Okay.
She'amar Adonai.
Stop. This is not Adonai. This is one word that always gets mixed up with Adonai, and this is the word "and it was." And it's the word, you can read it because you.
Okay, Vihaya.
That's it.
Okay. ha'olam.
Next
Okay,
line.
go on. Baruch hu.
Okay, stop there. So that's the first line of Baruch She'amar. Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam Baruch hu. It's a beautiful phrase, actually. If you can look at the English actually and see how that's translated. But the verb here is a past tense. We haven't really looked at the past tense yet, so it might be hard to see. But the word here is Baruch She'amar. Blessed or praised is God who spoke, and the world was. So basically, through God's speech, the world existed. Blessed is
I have
He.
a question that God's name is not in that. You're implying that God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all implied. You're right. It's all implied.
Yeah.
Baruch She'amar. Yeah, you're right. It's absolutely implied. There is no God in here. You're right. I didn't even think about that because I always imply that anything in the Siddur is about God in some way.
Also, I have a question.
yeah.
I mean, not a question, but when I saw She'amar, I was thinking of the Shomer. I was thinking of a guard.
Okay, well, what's different about this? Sherry, what stands out to you about this that's not Shomer? Let's take a look at how we spell the word Shomer.
Oh,
Shomer
it's
would
not
be
the difference between, it's an olive.
yeah,
Got
it would be Shomer.
Oh, okay. I got the wrong vowels. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
have the wrong vowels too on my keyboard. All right, yeah, Shomer.
Yeah. Sorry
Yeah,
about
you
that.
have the aleph in there. Actually, you've got the aleph. The aleph tells you that it's not. What's interesting about this is that it's she'amar. The shin is a prefix in this. It's not part of the. It's not part of the verb. This is not this line here is not the example of the participle. We're going to get into it when we look at some of the other phrases in this particular liturgical poem. But Baruch she'amar. The she is that. That I'm trying to think of a better way of saying she. Who amar she? He said that. Yeah, that. But not that as in pointing. But he. Oh shoot! How do I explain this in English? All right, Baruch she amar. Blessed is that was said. Blessed is that which was said.
Right. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
what's interesting, Ruth, going back to what you were saying about the lack of God, there's no subject in this at all. There's no subject in the sentence.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's typical of Hebrew. Typical of Hebrew is the ability to write a sentence and not have a subject in it. You can say that. You could say, blessed was that was said, and v'haya, and it was, v'haya ha'olam, and the world was. Blessed is he. So the word, the who, that pronoun is the subject of the sentence in a kind of roundabout way.
Yeah, right.
Think about that for 1 second. Give me 1 second. I have to pull this cake out of the oven or it's going to burn. And I want one more volunteer to read me the next line. Actually, I'm gonna listen. Well, actually, I'll take you to the kitchen. Save me from losing time. All right, let's get the next. You guys get a view of my delightful kitchen.
What are you baking? We gotta
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, well, I woke up at 7 this morning, so I thought I'd take advantage of the 2 bananas that were kind of dying on my stovetop. So I made a
Oh, very nice.
Oh,
banana bread with walnuts and chocolate chips, and I'll bring it over to my sister and my niece a little later.
oh, I can smell it.
Oven is off. All right, back to business. This is what's fun about working from home. Like I very rarely do this, but this morning I was like, I know I'm going to interrupt my class with this cake, but it'll be worth it in the end. Okay, we're back. All right, who is reading? Who wants to volunteer to read the next line? All right, Ruth, go for it.
Baruch oseh bereshit.
Ah, an excellent line. An excellent line. Here's our participle. So let's see how that is translated in this text. So here's our line. Baruch oseh bereshit. And here is that.
Yeah. Right.
And of course, the translation is loose. And of course, the translation is also an element of the author's, expression and, understanding of this liturgical poem. So it's not direct in that respect. Baruch oseh v'reshit. So the word that oseh, that's a pretty clear. We already know what that is. That's the Ayin Sin He, right? I just covered up the vowel, which is not a good idea. You can see that this is this vowel is a segol. This is our 1, 2, 3 vowel and not the 2 vowel that we usually get to see in that form of the participle. But it doesn't matter. It's because the verb oseh is unusual because it has these two weak letters in it in the verb. So it takes a different punctuation. It's like the masculine form is oseh, and the feminine form is not oset, as we've seen that the feminine form of the participle, it's oseh, and the feminine is osa. And that is why it takes the 3, the segol, and not the 2 that this takes 2. Podeh is the same thing. Podeh will also have the 3, but it doesn't matter. It's the sound of that oe that'll tell you that that's the participle or the present tense. So I could translate Baruch oseh v'reshit as blessed is one who creates the beginning, or one who makes creation. I mean, I like the translation of the author of creation, but the word oseh, the verb, we can translate that as one who makes as well, though I like author. It's kind of a poetic in a nice way.
So is oseh, what is it's a verb. What is it? The exact translation, to make?
Yeah, to make.
To make.
Yeah, oseh, we've seen this like oseh shalom, oseh, that's our root. So
Okay.
it's the Ayin Sin He, and you would, I mean, you recognize it because we've had it before, like oseh shalom. What else do we have in oseh? Oseh shamayim va'aretz, oseh, yeah, I can't, yeah, you've seen it before.
Got it.
Okay, so that's that, and interestingly how it's translated. Just we're noting the translation and how that's that kind of confusion of the verb versus this. Look at the author of creation. That there's no verb in here. Glorified, and that's like the Baruch part, right? Blessed. So all of the Baruch she'amar, Baruch oseh, Baruch, etc. And if you notice in the English, they're not all blessed. They're not all praised. They use different verbs in the front. So it's clearly a different kind of a translation to this. All right, let's take a look at a few more and then we'll move on to chapter 5. So who wants to give me the third one? Stephen?
Baruch Omar ve'oseh.
Excellent. Look at the vowels under the 2 verbs. Omer ve'oseh. So we have the oe for both of them. Interesting too. So if we look at that, glorifies the author of creation, laud the one whose word is performance. Interesting again, like what we're looking at are the 2 verbs here. These are actually, they're 2, right? We've got 2 of these participles. I'll take a different color for this one. But if you look at this here, we have omer, which is to speak or to say, and oseh, which we just saw up here, right? To do or to perform or to make. So their translation is here, which again, kind of interesting.
Omer is to speak.
Yeah, omer is to speak.
Close.
Exactly.
Mia,
Yeah.
it's Bobby. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
The one above that says glorified is the author of creation.
Yeah.
If you switch that around and if you said the author of creation is glorified, then it would have a subject and a verb, wouldn't it?
Yes, in the English,
Oh,
but in the Hebrew, it still doesn't.
oh, okay.
It still doesn't because the whole thing, like the whole theme of this really is the name. Well, the title that is given for this is Baruch she'amar. So blessed is that who spoke. And I think that again, it's a very weird translation of the Hebrew, but there isn't a subject in it. There isn't a clear subject. I mean, there's a verb, and the verb is masculine singular, right? That's about all I know about the subject of the sentence. So
Right.
that's the thing with translation, and I'm sure that you already know this, having studied Psalms, having studied anything in your lives, that translation is another art in and of itself, and it doesn't always it doesn't always bring the subtleties of the language. And what's interesting about Hebrew is that there's a lot of unknowns when you read something, especially in prayer, and it kind of does it gives it a layer of connection in some ways, because it doesn't tell us specifically anything about the subject of this liturgical piece. You can kind of add that into your own understanding. But then in the translation, obviously in English, we couldn't say blessed says creation, or blessed speaks and create. Blessed speaks and creates, because we're missing that in the
Right.
sentence.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I don't think that helped to explain anything,
I
but
mean, what are those participle nouns in the sense that, I mean, even though it doesn't sound good in English, where you're saying blessed is the speaker and the maker? I mean,
yes.
but it
Yes.
sounds terrible in
Yes,
English.
yes, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. And that's like kind of why it hovers in a gray zone of like, I could say Baruch. So I guess the easiest one, like Baruch Oseh V'Reishit. So blessed is, in parentheses, he, she, it, who makes or creates creation, or
Right.
yeah. So it can be the noun, it can be the verb. And that's the weird thing about this form, this weird present tense form. And also, if you notice, and I think we talked about this before in our other kind of investigation of some of these prayers, what's the tense in it? What's the grammatical tense in it? Is it a present tense? Is it a present continuous tense? Is it a past present continuous tense? It's an ongoing. I mean, what is it? And how do we use that kind of, how do we use grammar when dealing with our connectivity to creation and to God, because this is timeless in some ways, right? This was written back in the Middle Ages and before, and then we are kind of continuing to talk about it as a present tense, but it's present, and it's philosophically very complicated, which I think is why the Hebrew lends itself to this, because it's vague. Let's try the next one, and then I'm going to skip over some of these. I'll explain to you what's going on with these verbs that start with a mem, but we can move on to, I think someone might have entered the room. Oh, Rafaela, a little late, my dear, but I'll let her in because I'm not mean. Okay. All right. I want everyone to be here if they can. I'd prefer them come here before 9:03. That'd be great. Okay. We'll let Rafaela knows she's late. Okay, let's try this one over here. This guy over here. Another one. Who's got? Just call out. Just read. Just go. Whoever wants to read.
I'm gonna read.
Go.
Baruch Gozer Mekayem.
Beautiful. Baruch Gozer Umekayem. This is a really interesting one. Gozer, so if we look at the word gozer, it usually comes along the time of high holidays. Ooh, I did not mean to give it a little, I meant to not do that. I'm gonna give it a little X. Actually, that was it. That was the word decree. But like when we talk about in high holiday liturgy, we use the word gozer about gezerah, a decree. Well, okay, fine. That's that word. Baruch gozer umekayem. So mekayem, we haven't seen either one of these verbs, but I'll just explain them to you for the sake. So mekayem, from the word kayam, ani kayam, I exist, existence, which is interesting, different than fulfillment. But so gozer decrees and exists. I mean, very, again, lofty kind of ideas about God, obviously, because that's what God is, lofty ideas. This form here, gozer, is the same participle, right? Mekayem. So we're going to take a look very, very briefly. I'm not going to harp too much on this. Hebrew, and we haven't really talked about this, Hebrew has what we call a binyan, and I'm going to write it in English because it'll be easier to remember, but Hebrew has something called a binyan. A binyan in Hebrew is a form. Binyan. A binyan is every verb exists in a certain kind of a form. If I showed this to you, this might confuse you, so I'm just going to talk about it and not give you the layout because it's a lot of information. We have the very simple form, which is an active, and a simple active, like run, eat, sleep, read, things that I do that are active to me. Like I am actively writing, I'm actively eating. There are 8. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think that there are 8, 9. I think that there are 9 binyanim, 9 forms of verbs, of types of verbs. Some are active, some are passive, some are causative, some are reflexive. And I imagine that this exists in other languages as well. But what's unique to Hebrew is that when you have a verb and it fits into a certain type, a binyan, there are rules to the conjugation of that verb, obviously. So when we look at a verb that is called a causative verb, it comes in the form of a verb that has this mem in front of it. So I wanted blue. Try that one more time.
Could you give an example of
I'm
what you
about
mean
to.
by a
I'm about to.
causative verb? Because I don't know what that means.
Sue, my friend, Sue.
Oh.
I'm about to do that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
About to do that. All right, here, I was getting my highlighter so I could show you all of these verbs. All right, so I have merachem, mekayem, merachem, meshalem. All these verbs that start with a mem. Matzil is actually another one. Are all causative verbs. So what is a causative verb? I'm about to tell you. So a causative verb is kind of like the word causative. So I'm causing something to happen. I'm not doing like the verb itself. I'm going to give you a very good example of that. When I say to speak in Hebrew, I say, who knows how to say to speak? I masculine. Who?
Medaber.
Medaber. Okay. Meda. Oh, that was, I don't know what the heck.
Lo medaberet.
Yeah, medaber or medaberet. Thank you very much. But we're going to keep it in the masculine just so we could see it reflected on the other side for educational purposes. But I will give you the feminine as well. So medaber and medaberet. So medaberet is going to just have a slightly different vowel. So we're going to have medaberet with the taf at the end for our feminine. So medaberet is a causative verb. Why is it a causative verb? Because I can say, I could say, this is very old school, and it's a weird example, but I'll use it anyway. I could say, ani doveret, hu dover ivrit. Hu dover ivrit. Dover is the simple form of the same verb. So I have do, so you could see it, because what's the root for medaber? What's the root for medaber?
Daled beit resh.
Exactly. Daled bet resh is my root, even though I have a mem in front of it. So I have 2 forms of this verb. One is the causative and one is the active. So I can say that I speak Hebrew or I am speaking Hebrew. So I speak Hebrew and I am causing Hebrew to be spoken. A better example of that is, and this hopefully will be a better example of that, is I'm going to keep that mem. There it is. Okay, so another example of causative versus active is the word to teach and to learn. So I can say ani melamed, ani melamedet. There we go. Ani melamedet. Here, I teach. Ani melamedet. But you guys on your end are lomed or lomedet. It's the same root, but the verb is different. So I could say, Sherry, at lomedet ivrit. At lomedet ivrit, you're learning Hebrew. Ani melamedet ivrit. Ani melamedet. So what's different between those 2 verbs? They use the same root, but what's different about them?
Prefix? Is it?
Well,
Well, it is a prefix, sort of, but it is a prefix. Technically, that's the difference between them. But what's the difference in the understanding of how that binyan, how that root works, the causative versus the active? So if I say, Sherry, actively, you are lomedet. Or Andrea, you are lomedet. You are lomedet ivrit. Or, right? You're learning or you're studying. But melamedet, that causative means I am teaching. In English, we have a difference between learning and teaching. In Hebrew, it uses the same root, which is lomed. So that it's a thing. It's a thing in Hebrew where I've got the same root. Here's lamed mem daled. Here's lamed mem daled. And Sherry, I'll get to your question in just a second. I already see that you've got something on your mind. The difference is that these are two different binyanim. They're two different types of verbs. One is active, one is causative, but they share the same root. Yes, questions, because you're going to have a million of them. I might not. Yes, go.
Yeah, and I was speaking before saying I'm learning, but I was on mute. But my question is, you're using the same root. I am teaching, okay,
Mhm.
but I am learning. Would you also say I am being taught?
No.
Or is
Yeah,
there
you
another
could
way?
the different. Yeah. You could say I'm being taught, and that would be someone is teaching me. So like melamdim oti. So I am being taught. You would use the causative for that. If you are being taught, you would use the causative.
But would lo medit, would that be the same meaning? I am being taught or I am learning?
No, it's ani lomedet means I'm learning.
Right.
Ani
But-
lomedet. But if you're saying I am being taught, first of all, it's a different sentence altogether, because you have you are the object of another person's verb.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So you could say, like Sherry, you could say Mia melamedet oti. So Mia is teaching me, and then
Right.
I'm still using that causative verb. The simple, that idea of the simple verb, which we're looking at, we're going to look at that simple form for a long time until we get it, before we learn any of the other levels of binyanim, of structures. A binyan comes from the word for a building. Like that word binyan means a structure. So when we talk about verbs, they come in these kind of like different structures, because they each have their own set of rules in conjugation. But all I want you to understand about that is that when I'm looking at, if I'm looking for the participle, how do I find it? In the simple form, I'm looking for oe, ose, omer, gozer. I have the word podeh down here. And these are the simple forms of this idea. Now, when I have a mem, if you see that all of these blue guys have mems in front of them, there is a prefix, but the prefix belongs to the binyan. It's not a prefix like we've seen before, like and, to, the, with. It's not that kind of prefix. This is one that is part of the structure of this particular form of the causative verb. So let's look at the English for a second. I want to erase this without getting rid of everything. Well, let's see if I can do this in a very succinct kind of here. I'm just going to erase all this stuff. Okay, so if I look at gozer umekayem, this guy here is not particularly helpful in this, because it says decree is fulfillment. A claim is God whose decree is fulfillment. I don't know how that works with this causative thing. Let's try the next one. Baruch merachem al haaretz. Revere the one whose mercy envelops the world. So merachem, this is an interesting one. So you might know this word already from the word rachamim, like from rachamim rabim or rachamim. We see this word in high holidays a lot. Rachamim, mercy. There's certain verbs, if you think about the logic behind it, there's certain verbs that I can't do on my own. The verb in and of itself, the whole point of it is that it is inflected upon something else or someone else. So the verb to have mercy is not a verb that I can have it, but what is the mercy? Is it on myself? Having the mercy is something that is caused upon something. Does that make sense? In the same way that teaching is something that is caused upon, and causing is probably not the best verb to use, but it just means that the action is performed by me, but it is not, it's not consumed by me. I'm performing that action upon something else.
Could it be something like giver and recipient?
Yes.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
That totally works.
Which
Yeah,
in a way, philosophically, I'm sorry, Steve.
No, it's okay.
No, philosophically, I just looked over on the right-hand page. The chanting of Psalms celebrates God's sovereignty. I mean, there's a purpose to all of this that indicates, I guess, roles that we all play in this.
Yes.
So maybe it extends to one who gives and the other receives. I don't know.
That's a
like
beautiful
that.
way to,
I mean,
yeah, I think
because we in this country we don't have that view of teaching. the teacher-student relationship often. I mean, I'm not saying it as a blanket statement, but anyway, that's all.
I think that that's very helpful. That's very helpful.
I mean, I don't know if it applies to all of those verbs, but
We can look through them. Well, two of them are repeating, so that there are only three that we're looking at. Oh, actually, Matzi. Here's a. You know what? We'll go through them very briefly, and you can maybe understand.
and I interrupted Steve, so I don't know if he has.
No
I mean,
problem. Let's let Steve say what he's got on his mind. Go on.
I was interrupting you, interrupting me. We're totally
You guys are too
agreeing.
Canadian. You're
I
not.
think I heard Alexa interrupt you.
Whatever. I'm totally agreeing with you. That was exactly what I was thinking. If I put give for the mem, I kind of understand it, that I give kindness, I mem kindness.
Yeah, so I like that. So I'm going to say the causative. So that's like technical, that's what it's called, the causative. So causing or giving versus receiving. I like that. I'll put that in the book. Okay, so basically, if we look at some of these verbs, and we'll do this. You know, I don't really care how long it takes, as long as you guys are interested. I can stay on this, or we can move on to the next topic. So mekayem, we said, means to make exist or to make happen. Merachem means to have mercy. This one is interesting. Meshalem. So this one goes with meshalem sachar tov. So rewarding. And actually, this is a great word. You will all know it, because what's the root of meshalem?
It's complete.
Not shalom. Well, shalom is the word, but what is mishalem? What root does that come from? Just give me the letters. Give me the letters.
Shin lamed mem.
Fantastic. Shin lamed mem. What do we know about shalem? What does it mean?
It means complete.
It means complete or whole. So when we talked about, and this was back in the old days, we talked about that root word also being part of a word for payment. If I use the word tashlum or ani shilamti, I paid, that same word for payment is the word in the word whole and complete. And this one here, the word is mishalem, to pay. Now, when I'm paying something, if I'm making a payment, it's something I am doing to someone. I'm giving, as you said, giving to someone else. It's not a payment that I can complete a payment, and that's different. But mishalem, that mem in the front, means that it's being performed for the sake of someone else, not for myself. And the last one here, this is another good one, is matzil. Matzil is the word for to rescue or to, what does it say here? Redeem. And another thing that you cannot do you can't do it for, you don't do it for yourself. You do it for, or you do it to something or someone else. So again, a causative verb. So that's another, this is like advanced Hebrew. That was definitely advanced, but interesting, good for you to know that within the complexities of verbs are these very clear, if you have, some of my students who are doing conversational Hebrew with me have these giant books of conjugation, of different verb conjugation. And within those books, you can look up a verb and see how many different forms of that verb exist. So when we talk about a binyan, a certain structure of a verb, you can see how, let's say, the word lomed, to learn and to teach, are different. And like lomed, melamed, talmid, you've got a bunch of different ways where you could take that root and you can extend it. Not every root has that option, because not every root in its essence is that complex, or doesn't have that many layers of meaning. But certain verbs can go through these different types of binyanim, of structures. So any questions, like brief questions about this before we go back into our book and look at the next chapter?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Moreh, teacher?
Yeah.
So is that, yeah, I thought it was just, okay.
Yeah, moreh comes from a different root entirely, and it comes from the root for, I think it comes from for the root of instruction, which is different than learning or teaching. And learning and teaching are the same, and that's the same as lomed, melamed, talmid, student, Talmud, like the book of law, that is the study. Yeah,
I did that because I looked up Google Translates to thank Yael. Chava,
Hmm.
for my Hebrew lesson. So when I looked up Google Translate, teacher came up as more.
Mora, yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's interesting that it doesn't come from that same root. All right, shalom to that page. That was very colorful and very, I hope that lent some perspective of something. I hope it didn't confuse you guys too much.
No,
And if
no.
it did, my apologies. All right, so let's move on to back to our slides. So we were left on, I think we're done with chapter 4. We did the et, we did the bocher, we looked at the participle, and I think we're now ready to move on to, all right, we're ready to move on. Share screen. Here we go. I don't know why this page is so giant, but I guess it works for those who need to see. Okay, here we go. Chapter 5 review, starting on page 72. We have these two roots here, ozer and zocher. We have our adjective. So this is going to be the big lesson for this particular chapter is going to be the adjective. Helpful for us because we're going to be able to notice those adjectives a little bit more when we're looking at text translations, especially in some of these prayers that have a little bit more kind of colorful language, where we're what we saw before in the Baruch She'amar didn't really have that many adjectives. It was basically this idea of you are X and Y, you do X and Y, right? It wasn't particularly full of adjectives. There were no adjectives in that. They were all these participles. So now we're going to talk a little bit about adjectives and the idea of how do we accord them? How do we connect them to nouns? And we can look on page 78 for that. So basically the idea in Hebrew is that we've got the noun first, and after we have told you what it is that we are talking about, we then give you the descriptor, as in Navi Gadol, the book says, or Shem Tov, a great prophet and a good name. I would say the same for any noun and adjective. So I could say Bait Gadol, a big house. I could say Torah, Yafa, a beautiful Torah scroll, or Mora Tova, a good teacher. And what we're going to notice, of course, is the masculine, feminine, plural, masculine, plural, feminine endings and how they go along with the nouns, which is why it's important for us to at least have a sense of whether our noun is masculine, feminine. That's the hard part. The plural part is obviously less difficult to figure out, but the masculine, feminine, in figuring out how do we place a certain noun with an adjective is usually a little bit more challenging. We did discuss kind of how do we locate feminine nouns. The rule was every noun is masculine unless it's not, because most nouns are going to be masculine. Does anyone remember what some of the clues were to a feminine noun? Ah. Yes, ah, the ah sound. So the ah sound is usually a kamatz. So it's usually a, where's my pen? The kamatz is the one that looks like this. This is our kamatz. So it's usually a kamatz followed by a hey. That is what is usually the indicator. But of course there are exceptions. But if you think about a word like matzah, or you think of a word like Torah, or you think of a word like simcha, happiness, those are all feminine words, and they all end with a kamatz and a hey. That's one way. What are other ways to locate a feminine grouping of a noun? Sometimes a taf ending is another way of finding that. And sometimes an it, like a yud taf, like as in talit, as in mechonit, the word for car is mechonit, talit, tzitzit, all of these words are also feminine. So those are two clues. And then sometimes you just kind of have to memorize it. Sometimes you just memorize it, and that's kind of like with every language, it's an annoying thing of having to memorize. Questions about that, feminine endings, before we get into adjectives? Wow, no questions. Okay, that means that we remember this from last time. That's a good sign. So, yes. Question? No, that was just someone's mic went off accidentally. Okay. In English, all right, in the middle of the page 78, in English, there's only one form of the adjective. Obviously, in Hebrew, there are 4 forms. So we're going to look for 1 second at the slide of the 4 forms of the adjective, which hopefully will help us to see how that looks. Anytime, there we go. All right, so this is called the inflected adjective, meaning that it changes depending on what the noun is. Different than the participle. I feel like I'm having deja vu from the summer. Different from the participle. Why is it different than the participle? Anyone remember verbatim what we said exactly in July? How this is different than the participle chart?
Is it because it's not conjugated?
Well, yes, it's because it's not conjugated. Though we said the participle kind of does fit into this chart. You can kind of fit the conjugation in the participle / present tense. There are only 4 forms of it. Every other conjugation in the grammar, in Hebrew grammar, well, not every, not the imperative, but the past tense and the future tense are all pronoun specific, meaning that there are 12 different ways of conjugating each of the verbs in the past and the future tense, which is why we don't do those until much later. Present tense only has 4 forms. So it's very similar to this. It has the plural, singular, masculine, feminine breakdown, but how is it slightly different?
There's no root.
Thank you. There's no root. So we used to have these 3 boxes where we fit in the root, which 90% or 85 or 87% of the time is a 3-letter root. There are obviously 2 letters and 4-letter roots. We're not going to go there either. But for the most part, in what we're looking at now, the adjective can be anything. The adjective doesn't need to be 3 letters, right? The adjective can be as long as the word is. So I have the word gadol, I have the word tov, which both happen to be short, but I also have like the word me'anyen, interesting. Me'anyen is 5 letters long. So the adjective doesn't need to fit a specific 3-letter as we looked at before for verbs. That's the one way that this thing is unique. And the other way too is that it basically doesn't have a conjugation. So there isn't really as you said, there isn't a conjugation in that. If we have a root word that is like I said, that has weak letters instead of strong letters, we use a different form. That doesn't apply to the adjective. The adjective, basically, we're adding on these endings. So for feminine, we're adding a, as in tov. Here's my tet. Tov would be tova, right? Gadol would be gedola. Shamen, large or fat, would be shemena. Razeh, thin or skinny, would be raza. So I'm basically adding the ending to what already exists as a base form of an adjective. And you can look at pages 78 and 79 as we're doing this, so that I'm not speaking completely off the cuff. The plural, as it says, so if we move to the plural, so that the feminine is fairly easy. There obviously will be exceptions, but for the most part, if you remember this particular chart as being the way to inflect the adjective, then you're pretty much set. The endings are similar. They're similar to what we've seen before. So as in the masculine plural is im, the feminine plural is ot, and it's going to have to match to the noun. So if the noun is plural, the adjective is plural. If the noun is masculine, singular, then the adjective is masculine, etc. It goes together, and it has to sound right. It has to sound like if I'm saying yeladot chachamot, yeladot chachamot. So yeled is a child or a boy. Yeled yelda, yeladim, children, masculine, and yeladot. It's all that, those endings are pretty consistent with nouns and adjectives. Obviously, you can't turn every noun into a feminine. It doesn't work. I can't turn a feminine noun into a masculine, but I can, if my noun is already feminine, I know that for my plural ending for feminine, I add an ot. For my masculine plural, I add an im, and the adjective has to match that in its sound. The exceptions are going to be words that look like they're feminine and end in an im, like yom. Like yom. Oh no, yom is not yom is not at all. Sorry, yom yamim. So I have the word yom masculine. My plural is yamim, like yamim noraim, like the awesome days. Yamim noraim, yom yamim. Some words like will end with an ah sound but be masculine. Some words will end with a regular, having no indication of being feminine and actually be feminine words, like the word kos. Kos is the word for cup. Kos doesn't have an ah, it doesn't have an eat ending, but it's a feminine word. So I can say like kos mele'ah, like a full glass, kos mele'ah. I only know that because I know, but it's like any language where there are exceptions. You either get your ear used to it or you have a list of exceptions that you memorize. Nothing you guys need to worry about at this stage. But that's all we need to know about the adjectives in terms of how do we change them in case by case. And the other thing to note in this book as well, they talk about the definite article and how that works in adjectives. So if we look at the definite article, any questions, sorry, about that, about what I just said? It's not really that interesting or that difficult. It's just, I'm just stating the facts of how we do that with the adjectives.
Actually, I do.
Of course, I'm glad to hear a question. Yes.
Except it's really more of an English question because I don't know what the difference is between an inflected adjective and an adjective.
I mean, all it means is that it's that we change it based on the noun. We don't have it in English. It doesn't exist in English. The idea of inflection is just like there's no other way of saying it. Like, unless anyone has a better word for this.
Okay,
like,
no, I just didn't know that it means.
Oh, sorry. It just means, yeah, it just means that it's changed.
Oh, okay.
Inflected meaning that it's case sensitive, or that it changes case by case.
Okay, thank you.
In the same way that I'll say like that that there's a declension of the pronoun, like that it means that we're going through each of different case of the pronoun. There are a lot of things in English that I've learned through this, like that I'm like, oh, that's what that is. Okay, well, I guess that's the term that we're going to use for it. So that's all that means. Any questions about this idea of changing the adjective based on the noun? Shouldn't be so. No? Okay. So the last bit about this is going to be the definite article and how that works. And this is the important part that I think is once you get this in your head, you're going to find this to be pretty straightforward. So when I'm saying bottom of page 79, ha'em ha'tova, I need to have a definite article before both the noun and the adjective when I am specifying a specific, the good mother. I'm not just saying ha'ima or ha'av or ha'aba ha'tov. I need to have the hey before both the noun and the adjective in order to create that definite. It's fairly straightforward. So ha'el ha'gadol. We're going to look at the Amidah, that paragraph of the Amidah that's on page 80, in addition to some other things as well to show you how the hey works. That's a really good example because it's one of the few spaces in the Siddur that really demonstrates this connection of the noun and the adjective. So as you can see, it's bolded. I don't have to point it out to you in the middle of page 80. Ha'el, ha'gadol, ha'gibor, ve'hanora. So the God, the great, the powerful, the fearful, whatever, the awesome, etc. So every time you give a definite article, the adjective has to follow with a definite article as well. And that is our lesson for today, friends. Good luck with your Psalms stuff. And good luck with the reading. Those of you who are doing that reading thing, I got a warning about it. So hope it all goes well. And see you guys next week. Have a wonderful weekend. And be safe, be healthy, and take care. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Shalom lehitraot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Allison, Sherry. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
A good weekend.
You too. You too.